If you thought the lore of Elden Ring was confusing, Nightreign is about to take it to another level. After getting my fair share of hours in with two good buddies by my side, I can say that I finally understand what the story of the game is all about. And for me, I didn't care about being spoiled on Nightreign because, well, it's not exactly the most story-rich game, at least on the surface. It's this weird mashup of a Fortnite Elden Ring boss rush with some rogue-like mechanics, and I gotta say, it is really fun. But you aren't here for the gameplay. You're here for one thing and one thing only. Lore.
Elden Ring.
Melina, you're not important here. This game takes place in an alternate timeline to the Elden Ring that we know, so go ahead, shoot. If you like this video, crush the like button, and let's begin. This video might be a little confusing if you don't know much about Elden Ring's lore, which, by the way, you can learn more about with the link in the description, as I covered the entire story of Elden Ring and Shadow of the Erdtree in a video last year. But just in case, here's a TLDR. A landmass in a fantasy world called the Lands Between was, throughout its history, ruled by a series of gods, outer gods, and Elden Lords, being switched out over long stretches of time. At one point, a god named Queen Marika ruled over the lands, instilling her Golden Order. This order set a magical land-wide rule set as configured per a magical ring called the Elden Ring. It looks like this. It's kind of weird. Anyway, one day Queen Marika was like, I'm gonna shatter the ring because my son died, and bing bang bong, ring was shattered, which spurred the Shattering War. Countless parties and individuals fought for the power of the now vacant throne, since in shattering the Elden Ring, Queen Marika got punished by an outer god. Basically, she got fired by her boss and, oh yeah, imprisoned for fucking eternity inside a giant golden tree. Pretty simple, right? Now, there's a whole lot of stuff that happened after what I just explained, but what Nightreign tells us is that actually that stuff doesn't really matter. So what does matter? The multiverse. As we see in Nightreign's opening cutscene, Order was destroyed after Queen Marika had shattered the Elden Ring. And while there are plenty of events that happen in the Elden Ring timeline we know, contextualized in Elden Ring and its DLC Shadow of the Erdtree, Nightreign, on the other hand, pushes us into a strange divergence. See, once the ring was destroyed, it created at least two split timelines. Like how Zelda has different timelines to explain the events of their games when something majorly contradictory happens, like the hero dying instead of the villain. Some timelines share foundational events, but the reason they're split is because of fundamentally conflicting events that at some point take place. And Elden Ring here is no different. Just like the timeline splits into pieces, so too did the Lands Between in this now parallel universe of Nightreign, where the question is asked, will you survive the terrible, corrosive, and corrupted fall of night? To answer this question, we're going to need to know if there's even a way to survive it in the first place. In our new alternate timeline, with the Lands Between fragmented, our main focus is on a small, separated island we call Limveld. And within our alternate version of Elden Ring's well-known Round Table Hold, we find a band of peculiar people from many walks of life forming together, uniting under one goal: to take down the Night Lord, and thus to stop the night once and for all. Also, if you're a little confused when I say night, I'm not talking about like day, night. I'm talking about this storm that is like destroying things, and it's basically dark, evil, horrible acid rain. So very, very not good stuff. But there we have it. At the Round Table Hold, we have a way to fight back. So who are these initial 6 random people met up here at the Round Table Hold, and why are they so important? Well, here's the gist. The Ironeye is an archer with a certain darkness to him unseen in other characters. The Raider is as much a wall as the crushing stone block he can summon forth from the ground. The Recluse is a witch, if nothing else, utilizing blood sigils to destroy her enemies, while fighting alongside fellow teammates such as the Guardian, this strange bird guy with a damaged wing, yet who is capable of taking heavy hits and dishing big damage. But speaking of damage, the Wylder is perhaps one of the strongest on the team, utilizing both agility and huge offensive capability against enemies. And last for now, the Executor is playing Sekiro, and oh yeah, he turns into a furry. There are 2 more characters I didn't mention, but that's for a good reason. For now, what's important is that we establish that these first characters are in fact here at the Round Table Hold, having been recruited by something known as the Formless Master. And from here on, we get into the all too familiar events of you, the player. Or in other words, your events as the player begin in the Round Table Hold. You're one of the Nightfarers, which is the name given to you and your allies who have been rounded up to kill the damn Night Lord. You're just sitting there, napping at the otherwise desolate and large central table, before waking up and being approached by a woman who calls you the Condemned. She says she's known as the Priestess, the so-called voice of your formless master, and says that you were chosen as someone who could potentially vanquish the Knight once and for all. Strangely, the woman says that while you may not remember it, you've actually fought alongside her as well as the other allies in the Round Table Hold countless times against the Knight. Where these battles took place or how they happened with you and your allies making it back in one piece, that's not really clear. It's left up to us to think, were those just the past attempts of other players having played the game? Just a thought. Nonetheless, she explains that the Night Lord, a living cataclysm, is the dominant threat they must destroy. Because on the third coming night, if the Night Lord isn't stopped, the land and everything they know will be destroyed, seemingly for good. Pretty high stakes, huh? The priestess says that she has no means to fight, a rather confusing claim given how much she looks like she'd be a playable character, but you go on to meet the other members in the Hold, like the Iron Menial, your lovely humble attendant.
Do make yourself at home.
And the little pot guy that tells you stuff. When you're prepared, you head out on your first run into the land of Limveld, the first of many. Though in the game's universe it would appear as if two timeline paths split from here. Either you complete your task of killing some Night Lord by the end of your run in the battle-torn landscapes of Limveld, or you perish and Limveld and the whole of the lands between, and perhaps the greater world itself, is doomed, cast to the eternal night, all because you failed to stop him by that third night. On the other hand, if you win, slaying a Night Lord or sort of pawn of a Night Lord, you return back to the Hold, able to fight again as the days have reset, meaning you once again have 3 days to slay whatever new Night Lord there is to kill. Hopefully that makes sense, at least a little bit. Either way, you best get to it. And if you've played the game, then you'd probably understand by now why they designed it as a 3-player co-op experience, because as much as you can play Nightreign by yourself, the game is hard enough even with friends, which by the way make it a hell of a lot more fun, even if your focus is hunting for lore. Die!
Malchus, use Malchus.
Yes! Die!
Oh my god, we did it.
Oh.
Nice.
Yeah! After killing the Night Lord, the Nightfarers once again meet at the Round Table Hold, but it appears that your job is far from over. The priestess says that the primordial Night Lord still lives. Killing but one of his pawns was not enough. She tells the Wylder that they must continue on fighting these traces of the primordial Night Lord, pieces which may eventually represent the whole, a complete entity to be killed at last. At some point along your journey, you might just find a certain pocket watch, and if you give this pocket watch to the priestess, boom, a new playable character, the Duchess, a very agile, slender woman, highly skilled in sorceries and fast combat, with the ability to rewind time, reapplying damage you and your team has done the past few seconds, as well as making allies temporarily invisible. And speaking of playable characters, we might as well mention this little girl you may come across in the Round Table, staring at a picture of this guy named Radagon. Anyway, her name is the Revenant. Similar to Ranni from base Elden Ring, she's actually a doll. The Revenant is strongest with her Discord moderators by her side, but Revenant can also revive her team, and is generally a really fun character in my opinion. What's certain though is that with all of these characters briefly introduced, we may now carry on as the Nightfarers push forward, slaying trace after trace.
I can't see it. Oh shit, wait, no, run. No, run.
Beast after beast. Fuck, he's outrunning me!
He's gonna die first!
Watch out!
Oh my god, look at his health.
What the fuck? Until at last, you've slain 4 of the Night Lord's pawns. Meeting back at the Hold, the priestess has something to say.
I see it now, a sign of the root of all ill, of the thing we must needs slay, the onset of night.
It's time to fight the primordial Night Lord, an especially challenging foe. And here we have it, the final boss. Oh, what the fuck? Oh, hold on, that's the parallel universe where we actually suck at the game. Hold on. Ah! What the fuck, bro? What the fuck is that? What about this one? Come on. Ulting.
Nice.
Yeah. Holy.
Dude.
And with that, the Night Lord, or in other words, Hjolstor, is slain. We finish him off and find a strange sight. The normally desolate and empty, flattened dunes that we've come to expect as the Night Lord's arena thus far is suddenly graced with a familiar place. The Round Table Hold, but it's not on an island anymore, it's just kind of here. We walk inside and find some kind of husk of a person sitting amongst the ruins. The most straightforward option for most is to simply offer the Night Lord's rune, leading us to the first ending of the game. If you're confused, that makes a lot of sense, because I was too. So, to help you understand, let's rewind all the way back and reveal what exactly this entire game is all about and where it truly begins, because there is a lot more than you'd expect. In order to get the big picture, we need to focus on the key to Nightreign's story: its characters. Exploring the stories of the characters themselves is part of the key to understanding Nightreign, and there's no better place to start than with the priestess of the Round Table itself, or in other words, the Duchess. Long ago, the Duchess was once a virtuous thief, living under the roof of her stepfather, a viscount, which is like a lord. But the Duchess's relatively normal life ended when she was invited to the Round Table Hold. There, she would serve as the priestess, an honorable position, but one that would forever bind her to the Round Table's fate. After the other Nightfarers were drawn to the hold, at some point the Raider approached her and expressed concern for Wylder. He thought the warrior's constant fighting was taking its toll. The Duchess tried to speak with Wylder, but he brushed her off. The Raider then suggested that the Duchess bring the Wylder something useful, something that might help get him talking. So she finds some golden dew during an expedition and gives it to Wylder. He's thankful, if a bit confused. He asks how she knew about using it to repair weapons, a tradition only a few tribes knew, including his own. Then, in return for the gift, he gives her some coins from his homeland. The Raider commends Duchess's efforts and says it's best to leave Wylder alone for now, and that the doll is actually looking for her. She has a series of conversations with both the Revenant and the Iron Menial, who reveals that the Wylder may not live much longer. His vitality is suffered through battle, and the Menial claims that if the Night Lord is defeated, Wylder might not return alive. Yet, the mission must go on. Another day, it turns out the Wylder's gone missing, but the Duchess smells of fresh and rich aroma, and she follows it. Eventually, she finds him huddled up against a wall, asleep beside a plate of pita bread. She helps herself to one of them, thinking to herself about how it reminds her of her childhood. Then he wakes up and notices her, explaining that his mother used to make them just like that, and he's glad she likes it. He says it's one of the few things he does remember, through all the fighting and chaos. Originating from Windwale Knoll, he was part of a nomadic tribe that roamed the lands. His father led his family and people as their chieftain. One day, the night swept through the surrounding region like a disease, taking his tribe with it. His entire family gone, massacred. And from that moment on, Wylder swore to burn the night out of existence. He was a warrior with purpose, until he was wounded in battle and suddenly awoke at the Round Table Hold. Having wound up at the strange structure, he began to have dreams of two twin horses galloping together. He rode on one, and the rider beside him, a girl, wore an earring, the other half to his own. Her face was a blur, and he couldn't figure out her name, but the image was something he kept coming back to time and time again. One day, the Menial sends the Wylder to find him a slate whetstone, claiming the warrior's eyes are sharp enough for the task. When he returns with the whetstone, he notices something odd, an earring the Menial repaired, nearly identical to Wylder's, and he knows it has to be the counterpart to his own. The Menial says it belongs to the Duchess. Wylder confirms it himself, shining a light across its surface, and finds that it responds just like his, a perfect match. With the lost piece finally found, he returns it to her, and the Duchess doesn't hesitate to explain. She says it's priceless, a compass, she calls it, one that points towards someone dear. Later, the Duchess tells the Menial about the pita bread, and how it reminded her of her own childhood. Her mother made the exact same kind, she tells him, and the Menial can't believe it. It's probably at this point you've figured it out too. The Wylder is her brother. Long ago, she left the tribe, pursuing a journey of her own, and Wylder dreamt about that night when his sister smiled, telling him that when they were done, they would meet once more. But he had never heard from her again after that day. The Menial writes the Duchess a letter congratulating her in the finding of her long-lost sibling, but he reminds her to keep focused and to not lose sight of why they're here: to slay a lord. Meanwhile, Wylder discovers a page, half-burnt and ancient, saying that the priestess, or in this case the Duchess, is the cornerstone of the Round Table itself and is bound to it. If the night is purged, the Round Table falls, and with it, so too does the Duchess. But there's hope. The page mentions a new night. If the Round Table could be remade, perhaps her binding could be emancipated. The Recluse tells Wylder if losing the Duchess pains him, there may be another way. A tear of silver, or as we most commonly know from Elden Ring, a larval tear. So Wylder speaks to the Menial again and asks where to find one. The Menial sends him to a crumbled city called Necladio, and says it was once part of a greater whole. Now, what's interesting is that there is an item in Elden Ring called the Silver Tear Husk in and around the Eternal Cities that housed the Nox, a people who had long awaited a so-called Lord of Night, a new age, not one under the Erd Tree or the Greater Will. The Silver Tear Husk's description says, "The Silver Tear makes mockery of life, reborn again and again into imitation. Perhaps one day it will be reborn a lord." This city of Nacladio is most likely the third Eternal City, the nameless one that was under Lanedale that went missing somehow. Its shape in comparison to that of the missing part of Lanedale looks pretty compelling, if I gotta say. But this is not confirmed and it's just food for thought. Nonetheless, Wylder enters Nacladio and retrieves the tear. Meanwhile, the Revenant leaves a note for the Duchess, questioning her resolve, resulting in a duel. The Duchess prevails, and the Revenant reminds her that she's strong and that it's the reason she was chosen as priestess in the first place. The Revenant then gives Duchess a piece of her outfit to help her remember that moment by a silver charm. The Duchess later sits down with the Raider while he has a drink. She tells him maybe we shouldn't kill the Night Lord and that her and Wylder are siblings. This leads Raider to reflect on his own past, on someone named Weathervane, a former apprentice who left him and never returned, a girl who he thought of as a sister of his own. And on one of the subsequent runs of the Nightfarers, Duchess finds a note during another expedition, Weathervane's final words. After she gives it to the Raider, he thanks her and says to forget making a choice. Who says that taking one path forgoes the other? She sits on that thought for a while, before the menial tells the Duchess that if she weren't bound by flesh and blood, she might just be able to connect with Wylder outside the Round Table, though the chances are slim. But if she gave Wylder a blessing, maybe it would be possible. So she blesses one of the coins Wylder gave her via the grace at the center table, and asks the menial to deliver it for her as he's the only one she can ask. Later on, before the final battle of the Nightfarers against the primordial Night Lord, Wylder simply rests with his greatsword and hears a rustling of cloth near him. He finds a blessed coin wrapped in cloth with his belongings, a ritual that warriors of his tribe would partake in, meaning that no matter the distance, they'd always be together. He wonders to himself if his sister still remembered the custom. He clutches the silver tear in his hand, fearing for his sister's fate if they're successful the coming night, and pins her blessing to his chest plate. She dons a similar blessing herself, attaching a blessed coin to her hair to link the two of them, wherever they are. She asks the menial to honor the sacred bond to safeguard Wylder's life, and says that they don't have to sacrifice one goal for another. They can still do both, she says. But is that really true? Soon enough, we'll have the answer. And speaking of answers, we should certainly get some for the backstory of a character I played a lot in my own experience with Nightreign, Raider. The hulking man came to the lands between for one reason: glory. He wanted to face the Night Lord head-on, not out of duty, not for justice, but to revel in the fight itself. He wears the white horned helmet, a distinct look. Eventually he encounters the Iron Menial, who shows him a monument, something ancient, something tied to a tourney of strength. It lights up with flame. The tournament is beginning, but there's a problem. His memory is foggy, and that's not unusual. The Knight is known to mess with the minds of those affected by it. As we've established with Wylder and the Duchess, Nightfarers have trouble remembering their pasts. But over time, Raider pieces together the truth. He's part of a rivalry, a long-standing feud between two seaborne powers, the East and the West Seas, and between two titles, the Whitehorn and the Black Claw. The menial suggests that the Raider must be the Whitehorn since he's wearing the armor. He's been chosen by the monument. Then his opponents are assigned. One by one, he fights through the matches, waiting for the final round. But his last opponent never shows up. The menial tells him the opponent forfeited, but Raider isn't convinced. He travels down to the coast of the strange island the Round Table Hold is situated on. Deep down, he knows his rival very well and expects him to be late. And at last, said rival does appear, where Raider defeats the Whitehorn in the Colosseum. But something's off. He returns to the monument. The inscription has changed. It reads, "The Black Claw defeated the Whitehorn in battle during the tournament of the lands between." And this may sound weird to you, but it turns out the Raider isn't the Whitehorn. He's the Black Claw. The armor he wore, it belonged to his nemesis. All this time, he had been wearing the identity of the man he came to defeat. His black claw necklace, a jagged token, was once the actual claw of the king of the archipelago forest, a beast he killed with his bare hands. Back in the day, he grew tired of endless conquests across the seas. He took the claw and, as a final act, sent it to the Whitehorn, a challenge to settle their rivalry in a duel to the death. His rival did the same, lending him that Whitehorn helmet we know all too well, so that he could one day give it back after their final battle. Raider waited for him on the beach, but the White Horn never showed up. Weathervane, his apprentice, told him to move on, saying his rival was lost to night, but Raider refused to let go. He followed him to the Land Between, seeking the final fight. But after all of this has been said and done, the menial sets a tombstone in the White Horn's honor. Raider returns the armor and helm, placing them at the grave. The duel is finished. The rival is laid to rest, and the Raider dons the Black Claw once again. The tournament may have happened long ago, with him just kind of reliving it in this moment, but in his mind, it's real. The battle, his past, still matters, perhaps even as much as his future. In the cyclical fight against the common enemy, he and his allies are so desperately now trying to bring down. Oh hey, I don't want to waste your time here. I just wanted to let you know that I love to make these story videos as high quality as possible, and with that comes a huge time commitment. If you like this video, I'd appreciate it if you could subscribe to this channel and click the like button to help YouTube push it to more people. And who knows, maybe you'll like some more of my other stuff. Anyway, let's continue. On the complete opposite side of the scale to Raider in terms of sheer size, the Revenant is the only other character I mainly played in Nightreign, and as much as she's a tiny, unassuming little doll, her backstory is easily the most disturbing, painting us a clear picture of the cruel, grotesque, and unnerving results of the corruption and spreading of night. The Revenant seems to be the newest member of the Nightfarers, and you initially unlock her by, again, finding a strange ghost of her in the corner of the round table hold, staring at a painting. Interacting with her takes you to a tutorial area where you fight her as the Night Idol, along with her squad of spirit buddies. After defeating her, you unlock the Revenant, and from there, we can see how she interacts with the other characters. Fellow Nightfarers at the Round Table Hold greet her with warmth, and although some are weary of her allegiances, they're polite nonetheless. What they do understand is that the Revenant wants one thing: revenge against the Night Lord. But why does she want revenge? Over time, the Revenant uncovers the memories of her past. Her name is Daphne, and she begins to believe that she is the daughter of an esteemed house of Northernecroft, a family of master puppeteers. But the visceral tragedy that befell this particular family is unlike anything else we see in the game. As she begins to pick up the pieces of her past, she's assigned a task by the Guardian, who asks her if she could retrieve a weapon of the Night for him to study to better prepare his defensive capabilities. Killing one of the Night Lord bosses allows you to retrieve a Blade of Night fragment, and delivering it to the Guardian grants him your trust, as he intends to tell the others as well that they can trust you. Speaking of the others, the Duchess notices a kind of corruption overtaking the Revenant's body, breaking away her face, revealing a shadowy skeleton inside the doll. The Duchess claims that it's going to eventually overtake the Revenant, and in order to beat it, she must overcome her fear of the night deep down, suggesting the Revenant meet with the Witch. Without hesitating, the Witch helps you look back in time to uncover the root of the trauma.
Close thine eyes. Find the thing thou hast hidden.
The Revenant finds herself in a kind of manor, the Northernecroft estate, noticing a painting of a certain Edgar Blackcoat Northernecroft, as well as a doll that looks precisely like her, with carved letters that read, "My darling little Daphne." Before she can surmise further context, though, she wakes up from her vision. Returning to the Witch after some time, the Revenant once again enters a memory trance, this time uncovering the truth at last. The night raged through a smashed open window in the manor, where we can hear the faint screams of a woman. What in the actual fuck did we just witness? Okay, can we just stop for a moment and acknowledge this? Let me be clear. I've never played Dark Souls or just about any of the other games that are even remotely connected to Elden Ring or made by FromSoft beyond Elden Ring itself, but even then, I at least had some idea of what to expect with Nightreign. This kind of cutscene is something so visceral, I don't even know if I'd expect to see it in Bloodborne, let alone a so-called Elden Ring spin-off. They cooked with this, but they cooked so much, I got genuinely pretty freaked out the first time I saw this shit. Anyway, after that little girl was brutally bludgeoned by who we may assume is her father, or just some random dude that was driven mad or corrupted by the night, we see the doll, which just so happened to fall over next to her, actually come to life in a sense. The doll was already twitching ever so slightly before the girl was killed, but after her death, it seemed to be fully awoken. Who we now know as the Revenant leans down and picks up a small oval pendant containing a portrait of perhaps the girl who was slaughtered, whose name, by the way, is Chloe Northerncroft. In the subsequent Revenant journal entries, we finally understand that the Revenant is simply an entity which fully came to life through the desire of Chloe's will to live. The doll reanimating with the goal of avenging Chloe, that innocent girl whose life was taken because of the Night Lord. I do find it interesting that there seems to be a skeleton inside of her doll body, and the portrait she picks up mentions that Chloe needs to find happiness. Could it be that some terrible event unfolded in this puppeteer's family past that led them to create a doll with the remains of a loved one? It's not very clear either way, but you could certainly say that the Revenant has one of the most easily understood motives of any of the characters. But what if one of the Nightfarers had motives intertwined with their freedom above all else? That's where Ironeye comes in. Though, like many of the other Nightfarers, he has memories of his own to recall. Speaking with the priestess, we established that Ironeye is an assassin. Rewinding a bit, Ironeye belongs to a group called the Fellowship, a covert organization of mercenaries that settle conflicts through illicit means. They're known as Masters of Assassination, and Ironeye is referred to as a beloved child of the group. Each scion of the Fellowship has a guardian or custodian, and Ironeye's is someone named Isolde. After completing a previous assignment, Isolde congratulated him, telling the assassin that his next task lies in the lands between. Ironeye was tasked with hunting down a traitor, someone who double-crossed the Fellowship. He's instructed to begin tracking them within the lands between, which is how he arrived here in the first place. Eventually, he met the priestess of the Round Table, who tells him that she's also involved in this. This traitor was actually one of the Nightfarers, a member of their own group before, and he had abandoned his duties, at least according to what the Formless Master told her. So, since their goals here overlapped, Ironeye chose to join them. Later, Isolde sends him a letter. She describes someone, a monster, and says Ironeye should recognize them. This person is suspected to be the traitor. Said traitor's guardian was killed long ago, but whether the guardian died at the hands of their own scion or not, that part's unclear. Ironeye tracks the trail and ends up facing someone, another version of himself. Whether or not this person is the traitor isn't made clear either, but they carry a letter that directs Ironeye to return to the Round Table. That's where he can find the traitor. He tells the priestess what he found, and soon after, she leaves a note pointing him to the crypt beneath the Round Table. There, Ironeye finally finds him. The traitor is injured, slumped up against the wall. The man says he's been waiting. He tells Ironeye to do what he must to finish it. Ironeye tries, attempting the execution, but nothing happens. The traitor tells him he'll need something called the Edge of Order, a unique weapon imbued with the weight of night to actually kill him. The priestess explains that one can be found with the Night Centaurs, servants of the Night Lord, since one of them carries the weapon fragment needed. After he finds and slays the creature, Fulgor, Ironeye takes the Edge of Order, a fragment of the Night Centaur's spear, and returns to the crypt. As Ironeye finally strikes true with the blade, the wounded man is then willing to speak the truth. Him, Ironeye, the traitor, all of them, they're already dead, not allowed to rest until the Night Lord is defeated, cursed to fight endlessly. He isn't talking about the Fellowship here, he's talking about the Nightfarers, warriors brought into the lands between from elsewhere. Their bodies have fallen, but they're bound by the night and to some degree the Round Table itself, since their mission is unfinished. This traitor was one of them, but he walked away from his role, refusing to keep fighting. And so he asked Ironeye to do what he could not, find the Edge of Order and let him finally rest. At some point, Ironeye receives a blood-stained letter from Isolde. She speaks of a dream, explaining the scions, like Ironeye, are raised by the Fellowship and ultimately meant to be disposed of once their duties are fulfilled. But she had a different vision. Isolde's vision was a dream of taking the power of the night and bending the rules of their world. She wanted the scions to walk through an eternal night, a night that would never break, so they could go on living and fighting forever, free from the chains of the Fellowship. And now, with Ironeye understanding this vision and the Night Lord remaining as his final target, ahead of him lies a choice that only he can make. So by now we've established a few of the ways that the whole Night Lord situation might play out in the end, outlining a set of distinct endings, differentiated by the characters and their separate motives. But thus far we haven't established the character who may easily have the greatest connection to the Night Lord itself. And to understand why, first we need to know her backstory. The Recluse comes from the deep woods. She's one of many witches who lived there, secluded and surrounded by nature. Among them, she gave birth to a child, an infant imbued with her magic. The baby had an endless hunger, devouring whatever it could. It was never given an official name, but the others called it the Gnawling. The Recluse's close friend, another witch who was known as the Witch of the Wheel. She took on the role of caretaker for this baby. She was the one who fed and watched over it. At some point, though, Recluse crafted a type of magic, one designed to calm violent storms, a spell to save lives. But that same magic was later sold to an army that they twisted and repurposed. That army would eventually use it for destruction. One day, the baby vanished. When it returned, Recluse found that it had come into contact with the Night Lord, changing it forever. The baby was corrupted. Soon after, it became the center of a war. Two armies clashed over it. The child lashed out, turning on its mother and the Witch of the Wheel, baring its fangs, going on a rampage, killing without mercy. It devoured shadows, slaughtered countless people, and among them, the Recluse's friend, the Witch of the Wheel. Not only did the Recluse lose her friend, she lost her child too, compelling her to journey to Limveld in search of it, with a growing suspicion that the Gnawling was connected to the night itself. Following a trail of her own magic, she searches for answers. And that is when, like many of the other Nightfarers, Recluse found the Round Table Hold. Not long after, she notices something strange. The Witch of the Wheel appears before her, brought back by the Night Lord. She asks the Recluse a question. Could she kill her own child? Because that is what it might take to rid the world of the night. The Iron Menial then speaks with her, telling her the truth. That if the night ends, so too will her friend, but this time for good. The menial then gives her something, a peculiar bone-like stone originating from an outer god. The stone is said to be capable of expunging divine essence, suggesting it could potentially destroy the night. With the Recluse standing at the edge of night, wielding the power to expunge a god. A single question echoes louder than the others in her head. Could she do it? Could she slay her own child? While that question is left open, we do know that she was capable of causing great, though unintentional, harm, but not to her child specifically. See, one of those who suffered by the hand of the witch was none other than the Guardian, our next Nightfarer. But what happened to him and why? The Guardian's memory, like the rest of the Nightfarers, is broken. But his feels a little more intact, a little more rooted in who he was. He remembers the Pinion Folk, bird-like people of the Winged Realm. He was one of them, a knight proudly serving in the Scapular Regiment, shield and lance in hand. But then came the war. And with it, the curse. Their wings were stripped, their flight stolen. He was the only survivor of his flock. Since then, he's carried deep regret, wondering if, with more knowledge, he could have saved them, could have done something. So he turns to the Recluse, a witch known for her expertise in curses, and begins learning from her, seeing her as a kind of teacher. Memories return little by little. He remembers the raider forging him a helmet, teasing the bird, saying it would fit perfectly. But the Guardian had stopped wearing a helmet long ago. He said he didn't deserve one, not after what happened to his flock. He begins researching curses, finding books that piece together the truth bit by bit. He chases down where it came from, what it really was. Then, one day, a merchant comes to the Round Table. He offers the Guardian a charm, said to bring good luck. He plans to give one to the other Nightfarers as well. But moments later, the Guardian collapses. He wakes up in a bed and remembers what happened, realizing something's wrong. He checks to make sure the others didn't receive the charm. Then he immediately leaves to deal with the merchant and kill him.
What are you doing?
The Recluse whispers to him from behind. I guess you were protecting your flock, weren't you? The Guardian realizes and acknowledging it, finding a merchant's ledger, and inside, details of a deal made with a demon from the lands between. So he tracks the demon down and purchases a certain book. Inside the book is mention of a weapon, an Icterus, a weapon imbued with a specific magic, the same magic the Recluse had once created. If you remember, it was created to calm violent winds and save lives, but that was later repurposed by the army it was sold to and was used in the war against the Pinion Folk. That magic left wounds that wouldn't heal, and the Guardian's shield had been no match for such a force. His very own teacher that had been guiding him this whole time while he was trying to figure out the truth was the maker of the curse that struck his people and robbed them of their flight. she started it all, and he couldn't help but feel betrayed. He confronts the Recluse while she's standing at the edge of a cliff, waves crashing below with her back turned as she speaks with remorse. She tells the Guardian she never intended for it to be used that way, but she takes responsibility.
Indeed, I am the one who tore thy kind from the sky. This is the crystallization of that accursed magic. I entrust it to thee. I knew one day it would come to this. Now, do as thou wilt with me.
Tell me in the comments now, who is hotter, Recluse or Duchess? You can't say Revenant! She hands him a brooch, one imbued with the very magic that had torn his people from the sky. The Guardian raises his spear. All his memories flash before him, not just of the Pinion folk, but of the others. The Raider, the Priestess, the Executor, the Round Table, and his new flock. He lowers the spear, the hilt hitting the rocks they stand on, and she turns and asks him why. The Guardian says nothing, but when she looks at him, she knows, and the agreement is silent. She thanks him for sparing her, for forgiving her, and he walks away. His mind clear as ever and filled with determination. He knows now who he must protect, his new flock. One character we have not yet gone over, as I just mentioned in Guardian's story, is the Executor. He's someone that doesn't really talk that much, as he always seems to be painting. What we do know is that he was once a prisoner in the lands between, his armor being fused with his body, something that looks a lot like Crucible Knight armor. He has a conversation with the Guardian about the Erd Tree, and the Executor recalls that he once saw it and painted the tree, a memory that seems to have lingered somewhere deep inside him. Eventually, the priestess gives him a task. She asks him to find golden flowers, believing he's familiar enough with the Golden Realm to recognize the ones that still brim with grace. When he does find them, he returns to her, and she tells him to give them to the menial. After handing them off, the menial suggests that he paints the flowers. The priestess speaks to him again, telling him that they must enhance what little grace remains to them, and that his memories may hold the key to doing just that. As they speak, a voice calls out to her, likely the Formless Master, revealing the location of something called a golden sprout. She sends the Executor to the cold mountaintops to retrieve it, and there, near a minor Erd tree, he finds the sprout. It's clear now that they've been trying for some time to restore the light of grace to the Round Table, and this sprout is part of that attempt. The Executor is placed into a memory, and as the cutscene begins, he stands across from another version of himself. They exchange a few words before clashing, and when the fight ends and the other self is defeated, the Executor suddenly uncovers a new memory. He finds a shack in a quiet clearing. Outside there's a canvas, and nearby lies the body of a Crucible Knight. Inside the shack, another knight looms over a frail corpse, unmoving, the posture filled with sorrow, his grief palpable even in silence. Then he draws his blade and takes his own life, committing seppuku. Now, this is what I think might be happening here, because it's obviously a little vague. The title Executor is often confused with Executioner, but they're not the same thing. An Executor is someone appointed to carry out a person's will. The painter we see in the shack and mentioned in the journals was formerly imprisoned in the lands between and facing execution. Either out of compassion or honor, the Crucible Knight appointed to carry out the execution allowed them to finish a painting of the Erd Tree that they'd been working on. He couldn't bring himself to pass judgment on this person and rob them of their final joy in life. As days passed, the painter knew they couldn't finish in time before another executioner would be sent in the first one's stead. Crafting a sketch in solace for the night, eventually that dreadful day came, and another executioner arrived to complete the sentence. When the first knight returned to check on the painter, he found the second already there, and realized what had happened. The painter was executed. Overcome with guilt or fury or both, he struck down the second executioner and entered the shack. There he found the body cold and lifeless. The canvas and its easel remained outside of the painter's shack, incomplete. Unable to cope with what he had allowed to happen, or with what had been taken from this person he had perhaps grown care for, he ended his own life in the custom of the Land of Reeds. Now, the Executor exists once more, reborn, cursed, and living in death. His journals echo with fragmented voices, repeating lines like, "I am an artist painting the Erd Tree. I am a guest bearing a sword. I am silent. I am a witness." Over and over, different perspectives, blended thoughts. It's possible the Crucible Knight and the painter were fused into one soul, or he is the Crucible Knight that committed seppuku at the very least. The Executor carries both sets of memories. His sword may be the same one he used to end his own life, with his armor now melded to his flesh, the two becoming part of that eternal burden. In the end, the Executor may be exactly what his title suggests, left to finish the painting of the Erdtree that remained incomplete and to fight and deal with himself outside of the shack where all these events unfolded. After the memory, the priestess thanks him for what he's done, for helping restore the light of grace to the Round Table, and reminds him not to lose sight of who he truly is and what's been their goal all along. The stories of these characters are really beautiful. And I haven't even gotten to the conclusions for a lot of them yet. So stick with me here as we dive into the answers to all of these characters, as well as the fate of the Night Lord and what the endings really mean. Before we talk about the big man himself, I think we should lay out a few things that we know for certain to avoid some confusion. This pale, dead, old, corpse-looking guy, I don't fucking know what's going on here. It, by some means, is a conduit for the Night to exist in the Lands Between, as destroying the Night Lord's rune seemingly requires the presence of this body. And when other things are done to it, it either prolongs the night or stops it entirely. Another thing we know is that all of the Nightfarers are not actually alive, they instead live in death. We obviously know this is possible within the Elden Ring universe, and we hear and read from countless characters, notes, and item descriptions that the Nightfarers are free from their bindings and their sins will be absolved upon purging the night. As we head a bit more into theory territory, we have cases of the night affecting places seemingly aside from the Lands Between, but to less severe degrees, like the Wylder's tribe, Revenant's family, and the Recluse's baby being affected by it despite how far away they actually were from the Lands Between, unless they were all within it. But we do know that it's not fully on a global scale, at least not yet, as long as the Nightfarers keep up their efforts. While Raider is waiting for his arch-nemesis in his past life that had traveled to the Lands Between, his apprentice tells him, forget about him, he's lost to the night. This, among other things, leads me to believe that the night does not physically affect everything in the same way that is fucking over the Lands Between. What we do know is that the Night's reach, power, and influence has infinite potential and affects all things, as we read in the Night Shard item description. Whether or not you fear it or embrace it depends on the means of contact. Much like how life and death, among many other forces in the Lands Between, are dictated by gods and outer gods, I believe that the night itself, yes, I mean just the sky becoming dark at that certain time of day, in the Elden Ring universe is actually a phenomenon existing due to an outer god. It spans endlessly, it affects all things, just not as bad as you'd see within the Lands Between. The item called the Bone-like Stone reinforces this idea. It's capable of expunging divine essence, and Recluse actually uses this to expunge night essence or energy during her ending, which we'll get into very soon. See, the outer gods of Elden Ring do possess power, but there's only so much they can do with said power without some sort of vessel to do its bidding and carry the torch in its name. It couldn't just consume the entire universe if it wanted to. Exactly how Marika is the vessel for the greater will, Moog for the formless mother, whichever poor soul the frenzied flame chooses to destroy everything, just like how they all have their outer gods, Hilstor, who, if you recall is the name of the Night Lord, has his own, or at the very least, some type of greater force that's giving him his power. This doesn't mean that the outer god of night is inherently evil, however. Like with Marika and the Greater Will doesn't actually care what kind of order or laws that Marika sets for the Lands Between in the Greater Will's name, just that there is some type of order. If we take a look at the description of Hilstor's relic that he drops after the fight, it tells us that he was once a knight, and that he had challenged a hero, but he was no match, and fell among many others, another body in a great pile. But eventually, he awoke. Though he failed at protecting anyone or anything, he yet lived, and it was then when he cursed the world. Now, there are a few people he could have challenged that would fit the spot of the hero in this story. Could it be Radagon? Marika even? Perhaps he is the hero of Morn and had challenged Godfrey, but all of that is not very clear and is more or less up to interpretation. After he awoke, though, in this pile of corpses and cursed the world, I believe that it was then when the outer god of night chose him and granted him the power to lay waste upon the Lands Between, reinforcing his hatred and sorrows instilled in him one way or another. One thing that we should definitely touch on is that the Nox actually foretold this to some degree, as we know they were waiting for their own Lord of Night and wished for an age of stars. But regarding Hilstor, it doesn't end there. It seems that Hilstor himself doesn't just take on one solid form, but is more or less many different beings and Night Lords that, when defeated and acquiring traces of night, can be combined or beckoned to bring out the greater whole of the night itself, which would be Hilstor, the primordial Night Lord. He is not only Hilstor, but he is Tricephalus, the Darkdrift Knight, Augur, all of the Night Lords, and perhaps even the Recluse's baby. I see people saying that the Recluse actually birthed Hilstor himself, which is possible, but it's really not clear whether that's the case or not. All we know is that her baby is closely tied to the or a Night Lord. It's certainly possible that there are translation issues in the game present like we've seen in previous installments of the Elden Ring franchise, like when we made our original Elden Ring and Shadow of the Erdtree video, and then FromSoft just decided to remove the fact that a certain NPC was an Empyrean, a god candidate, after we already made our video. Anyway, the NPCs and descriptions when talking about the Night Lords sometimes seem to use Night Lord and Primordial Night Lord interchangeably. In Shadow of the Erdtree, there were different shaman tribes, but in the English translation, they were all referred to simply as the shamans. So take some of this with a grain of salt, because it's very much possible that, again, translation issues are making things way foggier or could disprove some theories, and I'm sorry, but I don't speak Japanese. So, nonetheless, the night affects the lands between the most horribly of all places, despite its infinite reach, because that is where the core, or its vessel, actually resides. Now this begs questions about those giant wood shadowy looking guys out in the ocean. Was that ending cutscene actually long before the night's end? And are these some type of being woken up and sent to the separated Limvel to help repel the night by Marika's grace? Are these the outer god of night itself? And are a fragmented being like Hjolstor is? It's not very clear at all, which sucks, because I mean, look at these guys, they're so fucking cool. Looking at the horde of them, I could not help but think of Attack on Titan. Anyway, all we know for certain about these guys in that ending cutscene is that they are leaving the lands between upon being touched by grace. And that sort of settles a lot about Hjolstor and the force of night. But what about some of the other stuff we've seen in the game that begs questions about the nature of the Round Table, the Nightfarers, and the Formless Master? Remember when I said the Nightfarers are living in death and are bound until they defeat the Night Lord? This is exactly what I'm talking about. There are a few item descriptions that are actually a lot more telling and significant for piecing this together, these being items like the Primordial Night Lord's rune and the Cord End, if you're lucky and found it even once during your entire journey killing all the Night Lords. Anyway, the Night Lord's rune reads, "The cutting gifted tribe anticipated the coming night and spent many a moon planning its prevention, concluding that their only chance of success was to cheat a god. They had glimpsed what they should not, the very sin of the Erdtree. For their trespass, so were they punished." And the Cord End reads, "The cutting gifted tribe vowed to sacrifice their own flesh while concealing the truth." This may not currently make much sense to you right now, but stay with me here. In the Round Table, there's a crypt which you've probably found yourself if you've done any of the character remembrances, but there's a set of coffins that say things like, "The ways of cutting point to Windwell Knoll," and it says the same thing about the Deep Woods, which, if you remember, those are the places where the Wylder and Recluse came from. These texts also mention extending a branch to them. A statue also stands at the front of this room that says, "To atone for the first sin, we elect to become the foundation." During Wylder's remembrance in this crypt, the menial tells us of how he actually used to take care of the people here long ago, and that these souls were laid to rest in the anticipation of the night. He says it was a ritual conducted in order to draw the minds of their descendants to this very place. More specifically, their souls, or their grace. This cutting gifted tribe, whether it was Marika's people or some other faction, I'm not so sure, but they were the foundation of this place. In anticipation of the night, they had to find a way to draw the souls of their ancestors here in order to atone and absolve themselves of their sin. A sin so great that they couldn't physically atone for it, which is why they began this cycle by sacrificing themselves to draw in their descendants and bind their souls to endlessly fight the night, incapable of dying, so they could try over and over. This is a common theme we actually have seen, the drawing of one another to certain places and connecting to things spiritually. We see in the opening cutscene to the original Elden Ring, the grace finding its path to Tarnish, and we see it in the end of the Duchess's story, which brings us to our first actual ending. In the simplest, most common ending for Nightreign, everything goes normal like we've seen already, with you defeating Hjolstor, but you're presented with this sort of distorted version of the Round Table. You offer Hjolstor's rune, it evaporates, and you walk towards the cliff, slowly turning into a trace of grace and heading into the sky. This is the Nightfarer's soul or grace becoming unbound, as the Night Lord is now defeated. Duchess's ending ties into the regular one, as her fate lies with the Round Table, as she's taken down with it and the Night Lord. But see, since she and Wylder had their sacred bond, their blessings that they wore, the souls of the two would stay connected no matter how far away they were from each other. That's what the Duchess meant by, "We need not sacrifice one goal for another, and could do both." Then it brings us to see that big tree-looking guy again staring at the Erdtree before turning around and wandering off into the sea. Despite his sister's efforts though, Wylder actually has his own ending aside from this, an ending where instead of just accepting his sister's demise and remaining connected via their blessing, he uses the item that he found within Nocladio. If you aren't familiar with larval tears, or in Nightrein's case the silver tear, there's something created by the Nox that allows you to change yourself into whatever it is you desire to be. In this case, Wylder uses the tear and becomes the new Night Lord, fulfilling the idea of that ancient text he found describing a new night. Perhaps this was what the Nox had foretold, that the Silver Tears would rebirth a lord someday, especially with the Silver Tear husk description mentioning the rebirth of a lord someday. Wylder couldn't bring himself to allow his sister to die, so he treads on through the desert, bestowing upon the world a new night. The next ending is possible by the Ironeye's hands, as he's given a choice between breathing truth into Isolde, his master's dream, or on the other hand to do what the Round Table tasked him to do, simply to stop the Night Lord and go on being an assassin until his execution. That choice is yours to make as the player. If you get to the ending with this character following through with his remembrances, instead of giving the Night Lord's rune to the body, you can choose to cut its throat, wielding your dagger, supposedly killing this being. He walks away from the body left in the puddle of blood and says,
"The night is far from over."
And then he goes to listen to his Spotify playlist consisting of Pierce the Veil and My Chemical Romance. Jokes aside, on this path, he fulfilled the dream of his master Isolde, creating an endless night, one that his fellow Scions could roam eternally without fear of the Fellowship. This further reinforces the idea that this body has to be the main conduit or way that the night is physically existing within the Lands Between, since without it, you wouldn't be able to erase the Night Lord's rune. Would there be anything you could do to even stop the night at that point, or are you just softlocked? Maybe we'll find out during the DLC later this year. But that brings us to the Recluse's ending, our final and fourth unique conclusion. After defeating Hillstore like the rest, she doesn't actually head to the room with the body to destroy the rune. Instead, she branches off to another section of the Round Table, heading to where the beds are, and she finds her crying baby. She cradles it in her arms and is at last reunited with her child she lost long ago, purging the night from it with the bone-like stone that was given to her by the menial. After the credits, if you go back to the beds in the Round Table, you can find the Witch of the Wheel, and she thanks you for bestowing your love on their night. She then fades into nothing, because since she was resurrected by the Night Lord in the first place, her existence was tied to the night. This honestly could be the most wholesome and tear-jerking FromSoft ending we will ever see in our lifetime, but nonetheless, I gotta say, some of the character stories and just alternate narratives told in this game, from characters that don't even come from the Lands Between, are just so alluring and suspenseful. I can't decide on which of the characters' stories I love the most, but maybe you can. Why don't you let me know in the comments below which character you played the most and who had your favorite story? Maybe you even had a theory of your own of what's really going on here. I'm just glad that the characters were as relevant to the overall narrative as they ended up being, because going into Elden Ring Nightreign, I didn't know what to expect, but here we are. I hope you found this video helpful, and thanks for watching. I'm in a white void, which probably means the video's over by now. If you liked it, slap the like button and check out this Elden Ring video right here. It goes way more in-depth into the whole story of the normal Elden Ring timeline/universe that very much is disconnected from the Nightreign one. Big thanks to my patrons for supporting these videos, and click on that. Revenant is not underage.